All right, we'll go ahead and call the Facilities and Operations Committee meeting for March 20th, 2024 to order. We have 4 topics that we're going to go over today. We're not voting on anything today, so most of the stuff is just presentations. And what we can do a quick round of introductions. All you gotta do is say your name, and we'll start over here with Ms. Kara Bradshaw. And then once we do that, we'll turn it over to Dan to start the presentation.
Hi, Kara Bradshaw, Executive Assistant.
Everybody, Myung Lee, Interim Deputy Superintendent with Operations.
Brad Nile, Anderson Construction.
Ayana Horn, OSM Project Manager.
Steve Efros, Senior Project Manager, OSM.
Steffi Knutson for Architecture and Interiors.
Gary Hollins, board member.
Chair.
New chair.
Julia Brim Edwards, board member and committee member.
Anna Bazayo, OSM Senior Project Manager.
Marina Cresswell, Senior Director for the Office of Modernization.
Marshall Haskins, Senior Director of Athletics.
Deanna White, Planning and Real Estate.
Dan Young, Chief Operating Officer.
Terry Proctor, Communications Department.
All right. We'll do everybody else, but we might be crunching for time, so we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay, the first item is an update to the Jefferson High School Modernization Project. And so I'm going to turn over to Senior Director Marina Cresswell.
And I'm going to make it quick and turn it right on over to my team.
Get out of Dodge.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of time, but I'll just note that we're doing essentially a draft of the presentation that we're going to be doing in front of the full board on April 2nd. So we wanted to bring it here first and get some feedback if you have feedback. Prioritize bringing it to people. I'll turn it over to Steve Efros to get it started.
Great, thank you. Yes, good evening. Once again, Steve Efros, Senior Project Manager in OSM for the Jefferson Modernization Project. And we wanted to thank you again to the Facilities and Operations Committee for the opportunity for our project to present the status of the Jefferson High School Project Pivot. So I'd like to first start with team introductions. Obviously, first you've been introduced to Ayana Horn, Project Manager in OSM for the Jefferson Modernization. We also have Steffi Knutson representing the Bora Lever design team, and Brad Nile representing the Anderson construction team and their consortium partners. Next slide. So here's our agenda for the evening. During this presentation, we'll be looking at comparing the old plan versus the new plan, reviewing the main components of the new plan, showing some conceptual diagrams for the layout of the new building. We'll be discussing athletics program impacts during construction, looking at feedback from the committee on our community outreach plan. We'll be detailing the current plan for permitting, and we'll be reviewing the project schedule and budget. So I'd now like to hand it off to Ayana to discuss the comparison of the old plan to the new plan.
Thank you, Steve. Here we show you the old plan versus the new plan. And the key to this strategy was first and foremost listening to the community's concerns surrounding the previous design requiring students to swing off-site. We want to say that we heard you and have adjusted our design approach so that we are now recommending building north of the existing buildings closer to Killingsworth as directed by the school board. This will require building an all-new building on the track and field and result in all-new optimized fields for Jefferson High School when the project is complete. This is a similar approach to the Lincoln modernization. Next slide. The project team has been primarily in a process of information gathering as we reorient ourselves to building on the new area of this site. We have been careful to incorporate feedback from previous engagement with the community. We have also met with the district departments such as athletics, security, Jefferson administration, and visual and performing arts to understand how the major zones of the building are to be accessed. We also spoke with the City of Portland on requirements such as the cross-block connection between the building and fields, which is similar to the approach in the Lincoln design. The current program components have the main entry on Kirby, the arts programs activating the street on Killingsworth, and maintaining athletics along Commercial. I'll hand this over to Steffi from Bora to talk about the planned test fits.
Thanks. Next slide. So these layout diagrams are test fits that enable us to make sure that the program, as required by the PPS high school education specifications, can fit on the area that we have. We also use this test fit process to determine how many floors are needed to fit that program, and that helps estimate the cost and the construction schedule. This currently works out to a 4-story academic core, which you can see here in blue, with the remainder of the building being primarily 2 floors. The purple shows the arts programs located close to Killingsworth, and the yellow represents the athletics along Commercial. This is not a final design, but rather an exercise that helps us identify where the challenges are as we do due diligence before starting design. Ayana is going to now discuss impacts to the program.
One program area, as you can see here, that is greatly affected by construction on our occupied site is athletics. We are still in the process of discussing program implications of the various construction and staging scenarios with athletics. But currently the plan is that the 1964 main gym building will remain open during the course of construction until the new gym is open. Once construction starts, the football field and track will not be available during construction for 4 years, from the fall of 2025 through the end of the summer of 2029. We are studying options for interim fields that balance cost, schedule impacts, and athletic program support to best serve the students and staff. Next slide. Here you see where we are proposing a community outreach plan, and we are looking for feedback on this strategy from the board. In addition to our community updates that we have been emailing monthly, which you can find on the modernization website, we have also been meeting with internal district staff, Jefferson staff, as well as students. This plan proposes to expand engagement outside of those traditional groups. We believe that the design advisory group engagement to date has been too limited to reach the depth of the community this project needs. We are therefore proposing to evolve our engagement beyond the DAG and expand our outreach to be community-wide. This list represents the categories of community we will be engaging with and are hopeful to work with the Center for Black Excellence Advisory Committee to engage with their partner organizations. I will now hand it back to Steve, who will discuss the permitting process.
Thanks, Ayana. So our new plan requires really a different approach to land use and permitting. The design is still required to be reviewed by the Historic Landmarks Commission and requires a separate conditional use review. Since our new approach will require demolition of the existing 1909 building, which is considered a contributing resource to the Piedmont Conservation District, there is an approval process for that demolition. However, the HLC has indicated that due to the changes made to the building in the 1950s, they will support the demolition if we remove the contributing status of the 1909 building. So the timeline you see here reflects the sequence to remove that contributing status. There is risk to the project timeline during the appeals period, or if the HLC does not approve the change in that status. However, we are moving forward with this process, and our next steps are to submit the application to remove the contributing status. You could go to the next slide. This slide shows the anticipated project design, land use, and permitting and construction schedule. Building construction will begin in the fall of 2025, and after we finish the new building and move students in to start in the new building in the fall of 2028, we will demolish the existing buildings and finish the athletic fields. The athletic fields will be complete and ready to use in the summer of 2029. Go to the next slide. This slide shows the budget and is based on the new hard cost estimate from Anderson Construction and is split into hard costs and soft costs. You'll recognize this format because it is the same format OSM uses for every comprehensive plan. So to start with, for the hard costs, parallel cost estimates were prepared and reconciled by Anderson Construction and an independent cost estimator, RLB, based on their review of the new site and building construction components. The $407 million figure at the top is Anderson Construction's all-in number for construction, and they will be sharing more details of their estimating process during this pivot phase. That number also includes all of the state-required 1.5% green energy technology, and there are additional owner allowances included for significant right-of-way improvements and abatement costs. Secondly, the soft costs are based on both leveraging design and engineering work that has already occurred, as well as planning for owner costs that reflect the latest cost data we have from recent projects, escalated to current dollars. Finally, there's contingency within the overall project budget that equals 10% of the total project costs, based on requirements for new construction. And the overall escalation for the hard costs that you see here are shown through the middle of construction and are included in the hard cost estimate. Next slide. So this slide shows a further breakdown of current budget, actuals to date, and additional budget required based on the overall current budget estimate. The additional budget required based on these costs is about $125 million above the current budget and funding for this project. So I'd now like to hand this off to Brad Nile from Anderson Construction, who will discuss the details of their estimating process.
Okay, next slide. So what you see on this slide is our estimate summary in two basic blocks. On the left is a detailed breakdown of the direct cost of work categories, and on the right are indirect cost items that include escalation, contingency, insurance, bonds, and fees. I have a few points to make before moving on. Our team has been part of the project since April of 2023, so our estimate is based on a great deal of analysis and detail that we have fully shared in transparency with the entire team. We've gone through a rigorous process of compiling costs and obtaining logistics input from our consortium partners and trade partners. Because of the project pivot, we are starting construction 1 year later than originally planned, and building a high school with an occupied campus lengthens the schedule by 1 year. These 2 years of escalation have a significant effect on the bottom line. One last escalation point, the pricing includes escalation to August of 2027, which is roughly the midpoint of construction. 2 more points. Our project is also the first school to be built under the PPS district climate policy, as well as the new resiliency and structural code requirements. And I would end by saying that we're confident in our analysis and estimate that our estimate accounts for the construction of a new building and fields while keeping students and staff safe while the campus is occupied. I'll hand it back to Steve.
Thanks, Brad. So thank you again, and thank you again to the Facilities and Operations Committee for the opportunity to present this project pivot. And we'd now like to welcome your questions.
Andrew, any questions? Yeah. Okay, we're getting a little bit more time. Yeah. That's a question.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I mean, I have it, but I think it's on the slide. I'm just sort of still going through it.
I'm just trying to process the increase in the price.
See, that's my question. I knew
Well, I gave you every opportunity.
No, I'm glad.
I mean, I'm just trying to
Yours
process.
is much more better formulated.
I'm trying to process what the question is of how to chunk it out, because it's just a really big increase. I mean, it will be, when Benson came in at what, 400, we were shocked. And something to come in at 490 is it's a $500 million high school. If you were to divide the 124 into the components of what that is attributed to in terms of the increase, what percent?
Like a 3% increase.
It's escalation, the difference in design.
Yeah, it's about a third of the price increase.
I mean, I think we've talked a lot about that exact issue, and I think part of it, I think if you might want to talk a little bit about some of the key drivers, at least from the hard cost estimate side. I think we've talked about obviously escalation, but other impacts, and maybe kind of discussing a little bit more in detail about that.
Okay, if we're looking back to the scheme that moved students off the site entirely, where we saved the 1909, that's essentially the differential we're speaking of, the cost? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, a couple of points there. That was an unoccupied campus, single phase, and so the logistical challenges of that were reduced. Saving the 1909 was actually less costly than constructing new. And I say that cautiously because it's a complicated formula that's not necessarily intuitive. And I guess a few other points to make is that this is an all-electric facility, and our mechanical and electric costs, how would I say it, continue to be significant.
The actual components of so putting in an electric infrastructure is how much more exponentially more expensive than?
Yeah, I'm not prepared to suppose what that exactly is at this time, but we could certainly dive into that.
So at 490, what's the price per square footage? And I guess maybe Dan, this is going to go back to the conversations we had when we were talking about Benson, and everybody was like, "How can we pay $300 million? It's going to be the most expensive high school in the state." And we looked at some comparators. Is that within the comparison of any other comparable project?
I think a couple of things, and I might ask the team to talk about some comparisons. And actually, one of the things, I'll jump ahead to when we're talking about the bond planning, it seemed appropriate to talk a little about construction cost estimating. And construction cost estimating generally for the last 7 or 8 years just hasn't been very accurate. With few exceptions, all of our projects, every estimate at every phase has increased. And so even projects that have had same design teams, same owner, same ed specs, and design guidelines, those have gone up significantly over the last few years. The pandemic, and I look for anyone to jump in here, has really exacerbated that. So it's been a very challenging number of years, and the current market is very volatile. Just a couple of examples we had, just by happenstance, a professional cost estimator in the other day, a COVID firm who was giving the presentation, and they referenced they worked on 2 libraries in Central Oregon, same design team, same owner, same specs, completed in the same time frame, and they were 30% different cost per square foot. So going out to market is very volatile when you actually get your bid. So I think that's something that we're seeing. And I'd be curious, Brad, if there's any thoughts about what you're seeing in the market out there today with your other projects that are non-PPS projects.
Well, yeah, the escalation allowances within this estimate, that they are enormous, right? And they are a bit of a crystal ball. And, we see the best data available in forecasting forward. But, escalation to November of 2025 that we're carrying is 13% as a point of perspective. And, these are cumulative. So we're adding on to the cost of work, $34 million there. Then escalation to midpoint of construction or August 2027, we're placing that as an estimate at 9%, right? So that's another $23 million. So these are staggering numbers, right? But they're prudent based on the experience and the general ongoing trend of inflation in the construction industry.
I know one of the things we did after the 2017 bond was, I'm just gonna keep going until you jump in. After the 2017 bond was, we changed the charter of the Bond Accountability Committee to have them take a look at projects. And I'm wondering if this new project scope and the estimations will go through the Bond Accountability Committee?
Yeah, we had a BC meeting last weeks ago, and just talked, because we have some new members, about their involvement in this process. And so one of the things we talked about planning tonight, I think we're getting close enough to a package that we're not making a lot of changes, so we can take what our cost estimating methodology to the Bond Accountability Committee. We'll meet a number of times over the next couple of months to say, do they agree that our methodology is logical, is consistent, and that they can opine on that. So we could see some changes in the numbers. We will see some changes in the numbers over the next several months, but the BAC will be presented what our methodology is and have an opportunity to provide comment.
But to be clear, they do not review our cost estimates by project. They weigh in on our estimating methodology for future bond vouchers.
Which was the issue from 2018.
Yes, and I just want to note too, we do have one of our BAC members here today. So I'm sure he's happy to answer questions from the BAC's perspective. Great.
So I should have started by saying, I appreciate the redesign. I think it's responsive to what the community issues that were raised. The price tag is really common. So that I'm just sort of trying to think through that piece of it. But I think from a design perspective, it's responsive to both the ed specs and also the community concerns that were raised.
And I don't know, Marina might have a better recall, like we've done over the years with Benson, it was projects before that, a lot of analysis of comparators, PPS to other like projects. We've done specific analysis on like specific trades, like our framing and drywall is our quote similar to other similar like projects we've done back a number of years. And I think, help me out a little bit, that just come back and said, yes, this is reasonable compared, to what you're doing to create your market or to other like projects and what that environment is. But what we've seen, I was looking at one of the professional cost estimators we use, one of the big ones, Ryder Levitt Bucknell, who's got an office here, they put out these quarterly reports. And Portland has been, in the last 3 to 4 years alone, I didn't go back too far, has been one of the hottest markets in the entire nation. And they average total escalation at like 7 to 10% each of the last 10 years. And you're compounding that, your prices go up dramatically in a relatively short period of time.
We did do, you probably recall from the 2017 conversations, we did a significant amount of cost research through different methodologies to try to see if we could sort of hone in on where we fit within the spectrum of costs across the country, and also within our local area. We tried several different ways of coming at it, and generally, where we got to ultimately was we were in line with what you would expect for our ed specs and the market that we have here. We did have Ryder Levitt Bucknell, RLB, do an analysis as well. They essentially came to the same conclusions. Ultimately, the cost is what the market tells us the cost is going to be.
I just have 2 questions. So I'm a little confused because when it was originally talked about the demolishing of the 1909 building, it was supposed to be actually less expensive to demolish it than rebuild. Now we're hearing that it would have been cheaper to keep it, and so I'm confused with that scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I think Brad's touched on it a bit. I think the part of the aspect is whether we have an occupied or non-occupied site. I think that makes a big difference in terms of it being a more complex. If it's occupied, it's a more complex multi-phase construction. there's just, you know, maintaining kind of that safe environment has a lot of implications in terms of how you do the work. So I think that's a component too. It's, I think, as Brad said too, the counterintuitively, from my perspective, you'd think that all the work you have to do on the 1909 to essentially retrofit and turn it into a seismically upgraded building would essentially kind of make it, you know, much less cost competitive. But the truth is, like, the fact that we had a building envelope, we had the basic essential structure, it's a wood timber frame building. If we're getting rid of that completely, we're essentially starting from scratch. So it ends up being, and with all of the, again, the resilience and climate policy requirements, you know, all of that to bring it up to that level kind of compounds the cost. But I don't know, Brad had other comments.
Yeah, Chair Hollins, I've asked that question repeatedly and from different directions to our estimating team. And there's a couple points that they keep reminding me. You know, the demolition of a 4-story brick building is costly, right? Over $4 million to just simply take it down, plus all the internal abatement of, you know, the hazardous materials. So there are certain costs that we don't have, should we say, the structure. And we're getting the basic structure, floor plates and facade is existing, right? And that's something we're not having to build to current modern standards. And so the cost associated with that upgrade becomes, the cost differential is purely the structural upgrade of that shell of that 1909. I don't know if that helps.
I'm still a little confused, but
yeah, I'd love to do a bit more homework on that.
Yeah.
And
get more. I like to little deeper
demonstration.
dive into that.
Can I ask related to that though? But I mean, is the right comparison here, if we were to, make sure I'm getting this right, remove the kids to another site, but then demolish that, then this original cost would have been cheaper. I think, Gary, is that what you're, I feel like that's what people said at the time, that, you know, this,
I don't think it was ever
It was
contemplated.
never talked about that way.
Them moving outside.
We wouldn't have occupied.
That's why there was the reaction.
oh, but that's the, I mean, that's this 366 million, assuming that they were offsite.
The only way we could get to 366 was to move them off-site.
Right.
That was why we're changing to not moving them off-site.
Right.
Asked us to
Maybe my question
move
was,
them off-site.
maybe I didn't ask it right. I was just trying to think, because Gary, I hear what you, I mean, I had the same sort of thought, but I think it's not a comparison between this and it's a comparison of, had we moved them off-site, there were other things we could have done that this would have been even, the 366 would have been even lower potentially, right? But we had sort of made
So
certain,
it wouldn't have made it lower, no, but we were above
Let me ask it a
the
different way.
366 by not moving them off-site.
right, but the 366 maintained the original facade, right? Had that not been a requirement of the original plan, would that have been less expensive?
It's really hard to say at this point because we'd essentially be backing up several years to when we first made decisions with the board about whether we go forward with new construction or if we can the old. And sort of the understandings that were in place at the time. The factor of time cannot be overlooked. The amount of time we continue to spend while we talk about doing something different increases the cost. So when we get to a solution and the solution is not appropriate and we have to go back and find a different solution, that adds time. Time adds cost. I don't want us to overlook the fact that regardless of whether it's new construction or existing building, we have added time to this process, and time means money. So we could go back to the last solution and it would still be more expensive than it was when we came to you 6 months ago.
Next question I have, if the additional 124 million that's not approved, what are the trade-offs? What do we lose or what do we not get?
The only way to stay within 366 at this point would be to remove scope. And it would be a significant amount of scope.
Next question, this will be my last question. With the significant changes in scope that we've done from the beginning piece, would it be in the best interest of the district and our taxpayers to send it out to rebid?
First of all, I just want to qualify that we have not made significant changes in scope. What we have changed is method. So we have not changed the program. We are still putting all the same things into the school. What we've changed is how we are building it
So
and the location on the site.
But
right?
demolishing the whole building is not a change?
It doesn't change it doesn't change what's going to be in the new school in terms of what program is there. The types of things that are going to be there, the amount of space that's going to be there, all of that is the same. The difference is how it is we're getting to that point. So either we're starting with new construction or we're starting with existing. But at the end, it'll still be a full ed spec plus the things that we said we were going to do. So just to clarify that, when I say change in scope, I mean we will reduce the program to less square footage, less of the things that you want to have in an ed spec. So clarifying that with scope.
Okay.
Does that change if we go out to, as you say, a rebid? We are in a CMGC at this point. We do have an option to end the contract. We could, at that point, choose to move forward with another CMGC. We could also choose to move forward with a low bid process and put it out to bid as is commonly known. All of those things are options. Would that change the cost? It could. It might not. Again, that's, the challenge between estimating and what the market will give you, right? We can estimate all we want and the market will give us what the market gives us. We don't always know what that's going to be.
Thanks. All right, any other questions?
Just really quick, so I don't want to oversimplify it, but I mean, essentially, the additional $124 million, and I do agree with Director Remember, it's good just from a perspective to kind of be able to say, like, this much is escalation, this much is demolition. I think that's helpful. But that really is a result of sort of hearing from the community. They don't want to move off site, taking the time to go back, come up with a plan that doesn't move folks off site. And then there are additional both hard costs involved with that and then the escalation of the time. But I mean, is it oversimplifying to say that, this is the difference of listening to the community and going back to figure out what it is. And if we were, and I'm not suggesting that I'm pushing this, but if we were to say, you know what, after looking at this, that's just too much. And to go back to sort of the original plan, to your point, Marina, that 366 is higher purely because of escalation. Again, with these inflation. The last thing I'll say, this is not for staff, this is more for the committee, which I'm not on.
Well, we're not voting on them today, so we just get a presentation.
Well, the only thing I would say is that, this is, and again, I don't want to suggest something that takes a lot more time and continues to escalate costs, but I do wonder from a community perspective, I completely understand where the community came from, right? And their desire to keep their kids on campus. I do wonder if the conversation would be different if we said, you know what, $124 million is too much. But you know what, we'd be willing to put $50 million more into the original plan to bring some extra bells and whistles to this, high school. And, sort of, I guess it's just, it's the community made a plea without knowing, none of us did, right, what the delta is going to be. Now that we know the delta, the decision for the board is going to be one of, essentially, do we move, forward with this or do we go back? All the caveats and risks of what that entails. So I'll just sort of throw that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
What is our timing?
I guess, how are we going to land?
What's going on April 2nd.
Presentation.
Do the
We-
presentation.
So we did not assume that this needed a vote for approval because we have not changed the ed spec. And we're still meeting all of the same requirements of the ed spec. Typically, the approval of the comprehensive plan, we only come back for another vote if we make significant changes to the ed spec or the program that's going to be completed. And we're not making significant changes to that scope. The scope is the same. Again, it's the method that's changed. So we didn't anticipate that it was a vote per se. It is a presentation, and obviously if we hear from the board that there are challenges with it, then we'll know that we're not moving forward.
But the thing we're gonna vote on would be, is still fitting within the 2020 budget?
It is not going to fit within the 2020
So that would be
budget.
where the vote would be, because that's where the trade-off.
Right, and I guess that wasn't in here, so the increase, if, again, we move forward, would be funded out of the next fund.
We need to be funded out of the next fund.
So there,
I'll just say, I think we need to be, like, the 124 needs to be broken down and much more, because I don't think we can say, unless we're really have a more precise set of numbers, that, well, it's because we're following the climate policy. I mean, 5 million, is that 20 million? I mean, so I think we have to be much more precise about how the numbers shift, because we need to be able to talk about it. I mean, we've got 480 students at Jefferson now. I mean, that's what the school report showed. And I just think we're gonna need to be able to show where that is. And then the other piece, the seismic upgrades, I mean, that's a real value, there's a real value to the building and the community to have I don't know what the rating, whatever it is, that the much higher rating. So like, how much does that cost? And I think we've said we want to build some of our buildings with those ratings as more to be also community resilient, for community resiliency. But I don't think we just like, well, it's just 124 million more. Just, we need to be able to specify how we got to that number from my perspective.
Okay, we'll go back and do some more homework.
All right, any other questions, comments, thoughts? All right,
Oh,
thank you.
Eddie's got his hand up.
Oh.
Okay.
Go ahead, Eddie.
Yeah, I'm just having a hard time hearing this and here. So I'm asking if when you speak, could you just sit up straight and make sure it comes from the gut and project? Use your chest voice, whatever it's called. Kidding aside, yeah, I just want to second what Brim Edwards said. It would be nice to see that breakdown. And I guess just a really quick question. Again, the sound was cutting in and out, so this might have been answered and I totally missed it. But you mentioned that Benson was, if I remember, like at 400 million, right?
Dan question.
There's, I don't know, someone's gonna yell at me. There's the Benson and then there's MPG, which are two different projects on the same site. So I don't know if
Okay.
Arbin has the
416 was the budget for both of those projects.
So 416 was the budget for both Benson and RPG?
MPG.
MPG.
Okay.
Both halfway.
Because I mean, like when I first look at this, I mean, yeah, the 124.7 million more is quite a bit more. But at the same time, like when comparing to like what Benson finished at or is finishing at, it doesn't seem like that much more. Just because of the rising costs and inflation and all that stuff. But anyways, I'll be curious to explore this more. So thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? All right, let's move on. Here we go. Ida B. Wells.
Okay. Marina, would you like to introduce Ida Wells?
Now that we've got you warmed up,
This is a good thing so far.
we're going to go ahead and bring you a presentation of two different potential schemes for Ida B. Wells for the comprehensive plan. We've pushed back the board date for approval of the comprehensive plan to May 7th to give us a little time to talk about this with you tonight, but also to get some more community input. And essentially, we have two schemes. We'd love to hear your opinion on which one you think should be coming to the board in May for the final recommended. So I'm going to turn it over to Donna to introduce yourself and walk you through the presentation.
Just curious, whose zone is Ida Wells in?
What zone would that be?
I'll just make sure. Okay.
Oh, wait, is that why you're here?
That's why he's here, of course.
Hi, my name is Donna Bazayo. I'm the Senior Project Manager for Ida B. Wells.
Welcome.
Thank you. We'll be looking at two schemes today, but I want to start with an overview of the Ida B. Wells site. As you've seen before, just showing this to familiarize you once again and summarize the major elements and constraints on the site. The school will remain operational during construction. The pool remains in its current location. The largest elements at play are the track and field, the baseball field, and the multi-use field in the western half of the site. The existing southwest trails are indicated by the red dashed line. We'll be improving those and integrating them into our campus approach as part of this work. After we review the two schemes today, we are asking for your recommendation to narrow these down to one scheme to bring to the full board on May 7th. We will look at each scheme a little closer than this, but let's look at the main differences first. You've seen two schemes similar to these before, where we've been looking at placing the new high school in the south central part of the property. The main difference here is keeping the track and field in its current location or rotating it to a north-south orientation at the west end of the site in scheme 2. If the track field and grandstands remain where they are, as in scheme 1, they will receive full upgrades, including complete remodel of the restrooms, seismic and ADA upgrades, and other measures to improve the look and feel of the grandstands as you see them from the street. In scheme 2, many people have expressed the opinion that they would like a more direct connection to the school and to the school property from Capitol Highway and the city bus stops. And some would like to have the grandstands removed as they can present a visual and physical barrier for the approach to the school, sometimes described as dark and uninviting. If we move the field and grandstands, we will lose approximately 500 seats when we build new stands to the EdSpec, which is for 1,700 seats. Currently we have 2,100 to almost 2,200 seats. Currently, those concrete stands have approximately 2,200 seats, though we've been told they are rarely, if ever, filled. In either scheme, we are not planning for visitor seating, as those are not part of the typical high schools and education specifications. There are considerations for keeping the concrete stands that would be a more sustainable choice. Neither seating nor sustainability seem to be a large factor in our CPC and community meetings. It was noted more often to remove the stands as they are seen as a potential issue when laying out the entire site and providing the best access to the new building. It has been stated that improving the orientation of the track is much better for reduced sun glare for players and all sports that use the field. We are still studying if complaints about wind can be improved. Looking at scheme 1 a little closer here, the scheme provides the opportunity for a pathway from the elementary school over here and from the softball fields to the building in central campus. Whereas if you had the track and field oriented on this end, you would not have that access there. Total parking counts for both schemes are about the same. The majority of the parking is on the south near the main entry to the school in both schemes. This scheme provides the option for a drive around the east side of campus, here around the baseball field. And there's been split opinions about this driveway connecting the two parking lots. It could have gates at either end. There is an existing drive along that side of the campus right now that has parking on both sides, double loaded on this side of campus. This option would only be a driveway. There is no parking provided along that route. In scheme 2, you'll see there's only a pedestrian path on this edge. because a road does not fit all the way around. Some people prefer that route, should only be for pedestrians. Others see this drive as a good option to keep extra traffic away from Burlingame Avenue or through the Riki parking lot, which have been noted as past problems. However, speeding through the current site has also been an issue. In both schemes, I'd like to note that the building orientation and massing for the building allows for maximum daylighting and minimizes western sun exposure, reducing building energy consumption and eliminating solar discomfort. Teachers have reported glare from the south-facing windows as well, and that too will be considered in the building design. Again, both schemes provide pathways through campus to connect to the Southwest Trails network and the broader business and residential district, making the school a beacon of activity in Southwest Portland. Building massing is optimal for a timber structure, allowing for reduced embodied carbon emissions, improved indoor air quality, and wood provides a warm, inviting feeling. The central commons in both schemes act as a heart of the building and the campus, and the commons connect to outdoor plazas, creating a variety of spaces for gathering and community connection. Site configuration allows for universal accessibility, going beyond code to create a physical space of inclusion at every scale. Here we have a view from Capitol Highway where people would approach from the city bus stops, and you can see where the grandstands are there and how the field is somewhat raised with the fence around it. So you would need to walk around the field as you currently do to get to the school. Looking at scheme 2, if we move the track and field, that allows for a direct and visible connection to and from Capitol Highway with these paths here. Optimal north-south orientation for the track and field for sun. Although the grandstands do face west, facing the stands would be more preferable to the east, but placing the stands on the hillside and near the school are the best solutions here. Again, both schemes provide for maximum daylighting, the connections to Southwest Trails, opportunity for a timber structure, central commons and connections to outdoor plazas, and universal accessibility. If we were to move the grandstands, this is the view of scheme 2 from that Capitol Highway approach. You can see where there'd be a direct path towards the building. Here we have a cost estimate summary. The baseline cost is $425 million to $435 million. This assumes a 2028 building opening date, 2029 project completion. However, that is a very tight schedule, not likely. If pushed back a year, there will be approximately $12 million to $15 million in additional costs from escalation. The difference from scheme 1 to scheme 2 is in the site costs. Oops, sorry about that. Again, keeping that track and field in the existing location provides improvements for less track and field disruption during construction, more seating at the grandstands, and the lower site cost. Just to summarize some of the comments we've been receiving from the Comprehensive Planning Committee and the Steering Committee. Those supporting Scheme 1 felt the distance to walk from buses to the entrance is about the same, and the grandstands may not be as intrusive as others have felt. Some people, including some in the Bond Accountability Committee, felt cost isn't that great when looking at the larger picture and the percentage to the total cost, while others feel those funds are a greater factor and could be used for other programs. Those supporting Scheme 2 focused on the access to Capitol Highway as a primary entrance. The sun on the field can be a safety issue as players cannot see into the sun. People noted that they liked the pairing of the baseball and multi-purpose fields in Scheme 2, and moving the tennis away from the residences that are on the east edge of the property. We should also note that we're still doing some geological information with technical survey and drilling happening in the next 2 weeks to gather more definitive information. There are concerns about groundwater on this site, and that still needs further study. At this point, we'd like your thoughts and recommendations on which direction to move forward with. Thank you.
Thoughts? Comments?
Just a couple, just reconfirming. So both Scheme 1 and Scheme 2 use it's no fossil fuel infrastructure, correct?
Correct.
And then the seismic standard is going to be the same as Jeff, what if the highest one? I forget, what, is it 9? Or did they shift the? 4.
It's risk category 4.
Okay. Because they changed the category numbers, or is that?
It's risk category 4 for the structure, and then just the mechanical and electrical support will be enhanced in the major spaces to operate for emergency.
Like a resiliency hub. Okay. Full ADA, and then I'm curious, at this point in the project, how much flex is there, do you think, in the, and we have a set of cost projections that seemed relatively close?
Be looking for like a plus or minus, or
Yeah, well, I guess I'm thinking like, because right now I'd be like, you know, we should go with the one that makes the most, has the community support, because they're not that much difference, but I'm just wondering, are there factors that would be, when we get to X stage, we could get more of a divergence of the numbers? Does that make sense?
Is one have a higher risk of
Thank you.
cost deviation?
and if there's a higher risk, it would be associated with moving that track and field. As I noted, the geotechnical information is not all in. That could be a large factor in moving that track and field. And all of this site work is the main cost difference there, and that
That's made in the
flex.
track. And then my last question is, in both of these, the decisions we made around the pool last time are incorporated in here, which is keep it where it is. It's the summertime place where Andrew and the neighborhood kids get to go.
I go every day.
Okay. I mean, I guess just my point of view is like, I think I look at this as like, wow, I wish every single one of our high schools had this big of a footprint.
How many acres is this site? It's like, sorry, it was in one of the things we had at the CPC. It was a lot.
I mean, it's amazing. So like either one of these is like, wow, this is great. I hate to buy into at a certain point, like, I go with this one, but if it has a much higher risk, again, just want to be cost sensitive. So that would be a concern. In general,
So
I
scheme
think
1 and
both of
2.
them are going to be beautiful assets for the students in Southwest Portland.
So that's scheme 1 is 2.
It's scheme 2 is the one where the field no. Yeah, scheme 2 is the one where the field moves. So this, like, to me, that's not a huge differential, but it's like there's some risk, and so it could.
So just to be very sake, which one are you choosing? What is scheme 1 or scheme 2?
2. Well, I mean,
I like 2.
6 to 8 million probably is less of an issue, but if there potentially became a lot bigger issue, I'd be concerned that, I mean, because I think scheme 1 is very nice.
Okay. Andrew.
Well, I gave my thoughts as part of the CPC process, but I'll share them since you asked. I think they're both really good. Actually, I'm going to say a lot of the same things Director Boom Edwards did. I think they both work really well. My preference is for Scheme 2 because I just, visually like the orientation a little bit better. I think having the field north and south would be better. I think your point is great about sort of the additional risk, and I assume as we get the geotechnical, there's opportunity to still pivot, and come back as things, happen. The CPC had a preference for Scheme 2, but there were a number of people on the committee who also preferred Scheme 1 for different reasons. So the pool was really interesting at this last meeting. We had met in this committee and decided to sort of keep it where it was, mainly because we don't want to take it over because of the operating costs, which are significant. There were some members, one in particular, who was very angry at our decision not to just demolish the pool. He wanted to get rid of it completely. And that was followed very shortly by another member who wanted to keep the pool where it was, but cover it, enclose it, heat it, make it our asset, and make it a year-round asset for the school and the community. And then a third member who looked at the first member and said, there's no way we're getting rid of this pool. The local community depends on it, the business community depends on it in the summertime. So just within a span of 10 minutes, we heard from 3 very different perspectives on the pool, which I thought was interesting. And then again, I think the different perspectives we heard most of the people, I think the majority, staff correct me if I'm wrong, preferred the reorientation, but there were some parents who said, where it is right now, you will lose the field if we reorient, and so they were concerned about losing it for 2 years? 3 years. But then, and I don't know, Gary, you know about this better than I think some people were saying the east-west orientation is really difficult for athletes. Versus north-south is better.
That tailwind.
So all that's to say, I prefer Scheme 2, but I think they're both solid.
All right. So I think we have someone who wants to speak. Yeah.
And I'm going to shift to phone. So apologies.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chair Howell, could I check that out?
Yeah.
I've spoken with both groups what the best orientation is, and have been asked what preference from athletics would be. I think a lot of things I've heard I would agree with. Selfishly, I'm sitting here going, Andrew turned out just fine wherever the he did go to the full. Oh, he's in the band. Okay, all right. Well, Seth is coming down there too on the band.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
The band.
Nationally recognized award-winning jazz band.
Wait, have I brought that up?
But what I would say is, just sitting here listening to that we lose the track for 3 years. It doesn't sound like a big deal to people in here. We just lived it, and it was a show. I'll just say that, right? And knowing that we're about to lose another field for 4 years, and if there's $8 million and we're not sure of what might end up being, I don't personally, as we looked at talked to my team, we don't feel like it's moving to east, north, south is a better option than staying the way we are. I guess that's simple as that. I just think option one just seems a better option for us, especially knowing that in my experience of value engineering, and there's going to be some other stuff that's going to be coming out, and the fact that this is the only site that we might actually have a full high school athletic facility, I'd hate to do something and then end up losing something else that we have as a result. I also like I think in the scheme one, I think the tennis courts were on the top northwest, north in the corner. On scheme one over there, I thought that in the parking and was a better model than two. And again, but I've worked there 5 years, 4 years. Lived on both sides, so scheme one for the cost, the $8 million to me is a big deal, especially when I just heard we might be spending up to $435 million. That was really probably like $490 million. That's what I heard from the other school with escalation. That those are big dollars to me in terms of what might happen. So we chose option one, but clearly we'll live with either just because it's the only footprint we have that has full athletics. So,
thank you. All right. Here,
Eddie's got.
Hey, Eddie.
Yeah, just quick question. Well, actually, one comment. In scheme two, it looks like your audience will be facing the sun during games, though, with the grandstand pointing that way. I was just curious. Just a quick question about you meant. Forgot who was presenting. Mentioned something to do with the sun and the heating and cooling preference over scheme one. I was wondering if you could expand on that, like how much of a difference that would be in terms of energy savings.
As a difference between the two, or really both schemes address those issues, and I would probably throw that to Steffi with Bora is here and could maybe answer that a little better.
Well, both Scheme 1 and Scheme 2's buildings try to make sure that classrooms are not facing east or west, which is the sun that is really hard to control and creates a lot of glare. They both try to make sure that all the classrooms are facing north and south. You can see that Scheme 2 has a little piece that goes up That's the gym piece in this scheme, which tends to have windows that can control the light. Both of them, though, would be pretty much the same in terms of their heating and cooling loads. Scheme 2 is a little bit more compact and a little bit taller, and it has, by that, it has a little bit less building enclosure skin, but I mean, it's kind of negligible at this level of design. They'll both be designed to be as energy efficient as we can make them in a reasonable way.
The other thing I wanted to know is, I think in scheme 1, we have the ability to drive around. Is that correct, Anna?
Correct.
Which I think, again, just my experience, it's a big deal to be able to go around the campus rather than only having one way of driving in and out. I can't tell if the parking is different, but it looks like the parking moved from around the side to now you have the more spots in the front of the building. Is that true?
Correct.
Okay.
All right, do you have any public comments?
Yes. Jasmine Reese.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Reese, and I'm also a member of the CPC, and I'm a parent of children in elementary school who will potentially attend Wells. I have a second grader at Bridal Mile Elementary and a kindergartner at Bridal Mile Elementary. And as a member of the CPC, we asked a lot of questions. There are, a good representation of people from the community on the CPC, and we asked questions specifically about the pool. And after reviewing the last facilities and operations meeting, we understood and we heard that there was no data presented from the community on what they wanted for the pool. And so members of the CPC took it upon themselves to public records request the deeds and ordinances in the IGAs related to the pool to discover what exactly the process is, because we kept being informed that it's a legal issue. It's a legal issue. We can't do anything with the pool. What we determined was exactly what Marina had presented at the last F&O, is that the pool is owned by the city. It could be terminated within 120 days with 120 days notice. And so we still questioned why the pool is not being considered in the total site redesign, given the topography of the site and the elevation of the pool and the other questions of the geotechnical report that is outstanding. So being a member of many moms groups, parent groups, PTA, a business owner in Multnomah Village in Hillsdale, I submitted out a survey on social media, sent it to attorneys whose kids go to Wells, and that was on Friday. And as of today, we got 60 respondents. And only one person out of the 60 said that they did not want the pool there. Everyone said positively they do want the pool and they do want it to be incorporated in the bond project and to be renovated with the site. So our question as a whole is there an opportunity before the DAG process is initiated to consult with Walton Hills Parks and Recreation District on maintenance costs for an outdoor pool like the Raleigh Park or Sunset Swim Center, or costs of enclosed pools, what the maintenance cost is, real today dollars.
Thank you.
And I emailed them to Kara and to Roseanne for the record.
And so we just put them in workbook. The survey is in workbook. All right, thank you. Any response? No response.
Thanks, Chancellor.
We did share some estimated costs for operations and maintenance at the last F&O committee. They were part of the report we provided to staff members.
I don't remember what those costs were. One of the questions that came up that some members of the CPC raised was, are we creating a situation where we're building a brand new facility all around a pool which is 50 years old? Does that create a situation 20 years from now, 30 years from now, when the pool is failing? Because I don't think we can expect to do much more than basic maintenance. That then again, maybe the pool goes out of service and we're facing a similar situation when we faced like with Granite Field. And I think if I'm right, the response from staff was, that's certainly a possibility, but it's also, given where it's located, not to say we would have funding to fix it, but it is fixable. It's not like it would shut down, the campus. Am I accurately representing?
It's an accurate representation of Donna responded.
Correct. Well, and we also designed the building separate from the pool so that if the city ever wanted to get rid of the pool for whatever reason, that could also happen and we could use that for something else. We also reported that we did have a pool specialist look at it and that it was in good shape.
I mean, I'll just say, Jasmine and I talked at the meeting. I mean, I completely agree that if funding were not an issue, I think turning this pool into a year-round asset would be great. And I am honestly, what was compelling for me, I mean, if we could add a few $1 million to do that in the bond, I might be pushing for it. What was compelling to me was the operating costs, and I wish I did remember what they were, but I remember they were significant enough when we're facing, $30 million of cuts this year in our school budget and more next year. It's very hard for me to look at the community and say, I'm cutting all these things that are super important core central services, but I'm supporting a project that is going to eat into the operating budget in the future, and that's a really hard decision because I think the point is really well made and really well taken. And I guess what I would say is, I think it also is the kind of thing we could do 5 or 10 years from now, both in terms of a future bond or, if the state actually comes through with, different levels of funding. It's something that we're not cutting off the option to do that.
I think the cost was $20,000 to $30,000 a month, is my recollection.
Okay, thank you. I couldn't remember what it was.
240. But just a quick question. So is this is not Portland Public Parks pool, is it?
Yes.
They own it.
Is there, just throwing out a question, is there, and I'll get to you next, Eddie, is there a way that we could talk with Parks for them to do, if we redo it, that they take care of the operational maintenance of it?
We had a casual conversation about that, and they did look at the use and don't think that making it year round, for example, is a benefit to them. They have a covered pool. Southwest Community Center that's very close.
They would be opposed to taking on additional maintenance.
They do so well with their maintenance. They weren't terribly interested.
Okay. Go ahead, Eddie.
Oh, do I have my hand still raised?
Yep.
I think Andrew kind of asked the question I was going to ask, which is, I was just curious about the future proofing of, the pool situation, but yeah, that was kind of answered. So thank you.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts? All right, thank you so much.
Do we feel we have clarity on the preferred option?
Yeah, they had. Everybody said 2.
Except Marshall.
I'm gonna go. Oh, except for Marshall.
Did Julia say 2?
She leaned more towards 2.
I was a kind of an asterisk on the 2, which is, I don't know if there's a way to know if that early in the process versus late of whether how big that additional risk is of moving the track and the site, changing the site. So it's like I'm fine with 2 as long as all of a sudden we don't get we went in and there's a whole host of much bigger issues that's going to cost us a lot more money.
Okay, so I'm assuming that's if I was paying spades, that would be like a possible. Oh,
towards 58th Avenue.
Eddie, what's your thinking? 1 or 2?
I'm a little bit torn between the 2. I could go either way. I'm sorry, I'm not being helpful. I mean, I see the benefits of 1, but I mean, honestly, the pluses and minuses for both are equally compelling. So I'm sorry, I have no opinion on this end.
Okay, I'm gonna just say 2, just because Andrew is the it's in his district, so there you go.
Is there any way, I mean, I'm good with 2. Is there any way though we could find out more information earlier in the process versus later in the process about, I don't know, the soil stability or whatever the issue is, that we do a little due diligence at the front end?
We are moving forward with our due diligence. It's just that the reality is that we cannot move forward designing both options at the same time.
Right. That's
And-
what
And so I guess what I'm trying to say is the longer we
we're speculating.
push a
Is there some reason we could
decision
lower
the more likely we are to push the opening down the road as well, which then increases the cost.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
I don't either.
It was an exploratory question of whether there was something we could do at the front end to.
We're doing everything
Somehow-
we can. It's just, I think we're, given the timeline that we are trying to stay on, we're not going to have every answer quick enough. I don't think we can make that decision based on the risk of that alone.
Okay, thanks.
So we need to make sure, are you a 2 or 1?
You know, because it's Andrew's zone, I'm gonna go with 2. I'll just, note my concern.
All right, there we go. Now you guys got
You're coming to the full board on April 7th to get, right?
On May
Yeah,
7th,
May
yes,
7th.
we are. We are coming to the full board and then we get everybody's official vote opinion.
And everybody still gonna follow you, so it's all on you. Something go wrong, it's Andrew's fault.
Yeah.
All right, so number 2 seems like, and then
I'm not on the F&O committee, so you
that's
all
okay.
leaning towards number
It was
2.
2. You just heavily influenced. All right, any other questions? All right, let's move on.
Okay. Next topic is on planning.
I'm missing the track meet. Okay.
We're gonna go quick, yeah?
All right.
This slide somehow didn't get in the presentation. It was there, I think, when it got converted to PDF. But it's just a quick summary of, this is our third meeting talking about bond planning. We've reviewed a lot of material, lots of different options. Some of the primary takeaways you can see there that staff took from our previous conversations were pursuing a larger principal bond amount, continuing to prioritize modernizations, allocating significant funds to address existing facility conditions, proceeding with technology improvements, and importantly, retaining the existing levy rate, amongst others. Those are some of the big ones. You have a sample option. You've got lots of materials tonight. You have the staff memo. You've got the presentation. You've got a couple of other memos regarding device refresh and curriculum. And you also have a levy rate analysis from our financial advisors, Piper Sandler, who we have 2 folks with us tonight to answer questions. And then this same conceptual bond budget sample option type document that we've used before. So the far right column is the updated sample option based upon feedback, based upon updated numbers. So when you look at that document, you'll see it's a big principal amount, over $2.2 billion. And it includes lots of very impactful work, modernizations such as Jefferson with the updated number, Wells, Cleveland, Tubman, and the K-5 Learning Lab, as well as funds for deferred maintenance, for technology, covered play structures, and athletic improvements. It's also worth noting it does not include some pretty significant scopes of work as well, such as seismic improvements, ADA, security upgrades, some educational improvements. And capacity, I want to call out, doesn't include any funds for capacity. We consider capacity whether it be building new capacity or supporting shifts of enrollment. I want a specific call here. I didn't change the slide, but because it was already posted, but Roosevelt Phase 5 is something that we are planning. Roosevelt has had 4 phases. It is not, doesn't have a full 1,700 capacity. That is not in the sample option, something that I think we've hit on briefly previously, not in detail, but I want to call it out here. We've got a bunch of staff here tonight who can answer questions about different scopes of work. We have Jenny Withicum, who I think is online, if we want to talk about PE and the covered play structures. Marshall, of course, is here. Our Senior Director of Security and Emergency Management Services, Molly Romay, is here. We've got two folks, Lauren and David from Piper Sandler. Joanna and Marcus can talk about curriculum. I know there were some discussions about curriculum. Dawn is here as well. We also have Heidi Bergman, who is our Senior Program Manager, who was our one-time capital planner, which is one of her duties amongst many other duties that she has. She's a wealth of knowledge. So if you have questions, we can take some now, or we can continue to move on and ask them at the end if you have specific scope questions. Just some quick pros and cons of the sample option. I won't go through all of these. You can see the option that before you continues the long-standing modernization plan, does include significant funds for other scopes of work and retains the existing levy rate. Some of the cons is some of the scope that it doesn't include that others may be interested in having that in a future bond. We may hear feedback from community members. A lot of the scope is scope-specific work, like modernizations. That means they need to be completed in full to be considered, completing what we are asking the voters to vote for. That adds risk. If you have a lot of defined scope, that you have to have the right amount of money to complete that work. It's huge. $2.2 billion is by far the largest bond in the state. We have right now probably about $700 or more million. We are projecting we'll have about $600 million left in the 2020 bond, 2020 bond, by the end of this year. So that's almost $3 billion we would go into 2025 with. That's going to take a long time to complete all that work. And that keeping the levy rate is going to have a long-term debt structure. So the total interest is going to be pretty high, most likely. Piper, we haven't done updated analysis on this number, but our levy rate analysis, but probably interest north of $1 billion. And as we talked about before, a future next bond would either likely be a decade or plus in the future, and or include a levy rate increase. This I'm just calling out to one of the goals of tonight is to really kind of confirm, do we have about the right scope of work? Because we want to move into further refinement of the scope, further refinement of the estimates, and also putting together some potential schedules of how we sequence this work. We can't do it all at once. So it's going to take this level of work, it's going to take many years to do. And we just want to be cognizant of that and show how we might sequence that work. I mean, to kind of put it plainly, some of these projects won't even start for a decade. And some of this work won't be done for well after a decade. So we want to start showing with the scope of work what that might look like to get the board's feedback. This is what I alluded to earlier about cost management. Construction cost estimating has been, I won't repeat it, but has been a significant challenge in recent years. The current market is very volatile. The one other example I threw up there was, this is just an article that I saw in the DJC. Multnomah County's new library over on the east side is $147 million, and it's less than 100,000 square feet. So it's not even a third the size of what Jefferson is or what most of our high schools are. That's over $500 a square foot.
Can I offer just like maybe one reason why that's over is that TriMet required them to put in underground parking, which is super expensive, just as a additional factor around that library.
Sure. Yeah, I'm certainly not want to say it's a total apples to apples, just more of a cost, or it's a challenging cost market.
Yep.
So our next steps after tonight is we want to continue our scope refinement and costs. A couple of areas that we want to get more detail on, we'll present is athletics and curriculum, amongst others, but those are two that we introduced to the sample option last time. We've provided some initial information. We're going to further refine that. We'll talk about program schedules and cash flows we'll be bringing forward. We'll update our levy rate analysis as well. Looking to kick off some more community feedback, and then the BAC, as we talked about before, I'm meeting with them soon Then the next meeting that we have is the Facilities and Operation Committee, April 17th. With spring break coming up, that's really just a few weeks away. With that fast, questions, concerns, comments?
Gary, can
Yeah,
I just make a couple comments because I'm walking to a 6 o'clock meeting. Is that okay?
Go ahead.
So a couple things. Thank you for the additional refinements. It's very helpful. I'm still all in on completing our high schools. I want to just lay that down. I think there's a different way to present the ADA and the seismic because, and this is, I'm going to go back to when we had the 2017 bond conversations, is anytime we do a modernization, we're putting millions of dollars into seismic upgrades and ADA improvements. And it shouldn't be presented as like we're not doing anything. So that's more of a formatting, because I think it will lead people to believe like we're not doing anything. It's like, actually, we're doing a lot. The other thing is, I would like to hear from Indian Ed and the Native American Staff Advisory Council on the Native Center for Native Student Excellence at another meeting or separately, because I don't think we've had an opportunity to talk about that. And especially if we're looking at not going out for another bond in a while, I want to make sure that we have a full discussion for this one. But otherwise, I really appreciate the sort of continuing to refine the work. And if I have questions on the IT, which I did last time, I will send them to Dan and Don.
That's great.
All right.
I want to make sure at sort of a high level that I'm looking at the right things, Dan, but our new bond conceptual budget 2.2 billion, but the financing stuff is still showing at 1.8.
Correct. So we haven't had an opportunity to ask Piper to update based upon this new number we had. And I apologize, a lot of the materials came in late. Lots of numbers changing coming in late, but we will have that for next time.
Okay, you'll have it for next time. Okay, and that's gonna again probably push out the longer financing, higher interest rate costs. Did you say Piper's here tonight?
Virtually, we have both David and Lauren.
Okay, and I guess maybe if we're gonna get new numbers, we don't need to spend too much time on it, but I wanted to just make sure, let me open up that document again. When looking at sort of the 1.8 billion, and again, the goal here, which we gave you, was to keep it at 250 in terms of a levy rate. The first option with 28-year issue obviously has very expensive interest because again it's a 28-year, so it's like a home mortgage, right? You pay a ton of interest. It's like a $1.8 billion home mortgage, and you pay a lot. But that allowed us to go out for another next bond, again staying at the same tax rate at 2032. Versus, I think I'm going to answer the question as I'm talking, but versus a shorter issue of 16 years dramatically reduces the interest, but extends by actually 11 more years. It's almost 10. It's actually 11 more years before we can go out again. And that's just because we got to pay that higher rate for longer in order to pay the debt off earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And Lauren or David, if you want to add any extra.
It's kind of obvious, but I just wanted to say.
One thing I will add to that, I think, with that levy drop, I don't know, and I don't think anyone knows is, obviously it's pretty far out to project is, I think it's still possible that to go out and another bond at that time, you would still need an increase. It wouldn't be as much of an increase.
Okay. And do we need to decide that? If we were to settle on a 1.8 or maybe we new numbers at 2.2, but the financing question can actually be answered after a bond passes, right? The bond gives us the authority to borrow up to a certain amount and it's actually the levy it's just the amount to borrow up to a certain amount. But we could actually make that decision later. This is sort of a question. Hey, Laura.
Hi. So yes, you can make changes to the structure every time you go to issue, right? And we model out multiple series for issuing. And so every time.
Excuse me. Good, sorry.
Lauren, can you get a little maybe closer to your mic? We're having just a little tough time hearing you.
Trouble with my setup, but you do. Is this better?
That's better, yeah.
You do have the chance to adjust the structure every time you issue a series of bonds. You will have a maximum term that's included in the ballot table, so you can go no longer than that. So obviously, including a longer term is going to provide you with the most flexibility because you can always shorten series of bonds down.
And would we be able to, I'm just trying to remember refinancing rules, would we be able to, I mean, it wouldn't be advisable, but never mind, I'm not even gonna ask that question. But thank you, you answered the question. Did you get what she was saying? So
Yeah.
essentially, we've included a bond title, a long financing term, and then
Kind of like paying your mortgage off early.
right, from a fiscal management perspective, we can sort of decide. Because I will tell you, I'm very concerned, I mean, 28-year bonds are really long for government bonds, right? If people buy houses on 30 years, governments generally, it's advisable not to issue longer than 20. You can for assets that are gonna last longer than 20, and these assets will last longer than 20 years, but just from a public financing perspective, it's advisable not to. So I'm really drawn towards the shorter issue and I mean, saving $1 billion of interest is not a small amount of interest. But I also want to be cognizant of the fact that, we're putting off for 20 years, issuing another bond. Although, Dan, to your point, it's going to take us, without a tax increase, I should say, without a tax increase. To your point, it's going to take us 10 to, what was your estimate on 10 to how many years?
We put at 200 million a year, which we've been averaging for the last 3 or 4 years. I can't remember. That's about 14 years.
But it's still 14 years to complete the work.
To complete the work,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Let me see, I have just a couple other quick questions. And maybe this is for Don. The ERP at $38 million, is that conceptual at this point? I know you're
We don't have a detailed budget at this point. We're working through the negotiations with the provider and the implementer for it right now. But there are some other elements that will need to go into this. What do we do with 20 years of data history in our old ERP and building out the structure for that and or collection of data warehouses.
Okay.
So we're working on refining a specific budget, but it's in alignment with what that 10-year cost estimate is, the full tenure of the contract, plus contingency for the other elements that we're gonna have to put in place, and knowing that we're gonna have to back out into operational expense at some point.
Okay, but you're in contract negotiations right now?
Correct.
You're in the letter. Great. And then I guess, Dan, do we need to be prepared for when the new financing comes back that we may not be able to get 2.2 million? I mean, is that, or at the current tax rate, or we think we can, it's just a matter of how we finance it on the back end?
I believe that answered how we finance it. The question, if you heard David or Lauren, was, do we think that we wouldn't be able to get 2.2 billion, or is it just a financing configuration?
Oh, I think we have the capacity to do 2.2 at the 250 levy rate. It's just going to be pushing out the timing of that issuance a little bit farther.
Okay. Can you remind me what the PE, I know it's in your memo, I'm sorry, but the PE, the $33 million there was for?
It's for covered play structures to meet our PE state requirements. And we do have Jenny Luke come here if you want to ask any more kind of probing questions around why that's an important scope of work or what goes into it.
I just couldn't remember what it was for.
Okay.
That's all my questions.
Dan, one important note on the original scenario where the max term was 28 years. I would agree that that is longer than we see in a lot of places, but I would note in the packet, if you look at the scenarios presented, you would find the graph on what is our page 6 where this is a series of bonds stacked. 28 years is the maximum tail on a little bit that drags through. Most of the series that are issued would be far less. If you issue them all at 28 years, your interest would not be 95%. Your total interest would be like, 180% or something like that. It would be really explosive. But most of the series would be far less than that. I mean, I think you're looking in the teens for duration for a lot of those series. It's just a little tail that kind of drags through to the duration.
That's helpful clarification. Thanks, Dave.
Eddie, have any questions?
No, I'm just listening and learning. It's a lot to take in.
Okay. I just have a few questions. When we talk about an ADA piece and we don't have anything for it, or is any of the projects that we need to do, that need to be happening, or out of compliance at this time for ADA that we probably need to include?
So I'll give an answer, then I'll let Heidi correct me when I get wrong. So our schools now, so what the 2020 bond includes, and Julia's 100% modernizations, projects are full ADA compliant, or other work can do that as well. There's a dedicated ADA funds to tackle the next phase of our ADA transition plan. The first phase is first floor access. So a lot of our sites do not have full access to upper floors, don't have elevators. Architectural barriers is the term that we use. So for the district to be in ADA compliance, if there is someone who needs to access an inaccessible area, we have to relocate in some form or another. That gets us into compliance, but that is definitely not the situation we want to be in. Heidi, is that a fair oversimplification?
That's exactly right. Our obligation under the federal legislation is to make our programs accessible. We already do that. What the 2020 bond funding is doing to make that easier is it is creating main level accessibility across the district. So that work is funded and underway and will be complete. Phases 3 and 4 identified in the ADA transition plan create basically an enhancement. It's multi-level accessibility across the district. So then that lets us, when we look at our space planning for the district, have our programs anywhere. We don't have to adjust to make the program accessible once the building is fully accessible on all levels.
Security too. Question about security. So there'll be a lot of these questions around some of the stuff that has zero. My question is, what would we could have been getting if we have added money to those? So for instance, you're talking about security, outdoor space, by us moving money around, what are we missing out of the things that we're not funding?
Well, I did want to make sure we highlighted security a little bit, so I'll let Molly talk about what the potential scopes are and highlight the PAT component as well.
Yeah, so we identified a number of potential security projects for the 2024 bond. Thinking about our layered approach to security, we identified sort of our boundary layer around maybe some potential opportunity for fencing. We identified vestibules, which is in our current standard and ed specs. Those are fairly costly. And then some of the more lower hanging fruit, and one of the things that was identified in the PAT contract around window coverings, to finish off our surveillance project that we're currently working on in the 2020 bond. And then to upgrade our antiquated access control system, to bring that up to current. Don can talk a little bit more about.
So we'd have a encryption system so that we have encrypted. You all were present when student brought forth having flipper readers being able to those. It moves us to a higher level of encryption in our cards. That makes them harder to gain access.
In addition to Franklin and Roosevelt also bring those systems up to align with their bell schedules. So there's some larger projects, and then there's also some lower hanging fruit projects.
the 2017 bond and the 2020 bond had a security component. So obviously, we would advocate strongly to have a security component in the 2024 bond.
I guess one of my things is that since it is a big bond, is there a way we could at least give something, a little something for everyone? For instance, we're talking about, for some of these ones that you identified that we're not going to be hitting, is there a way we could add in some for those as well? And of course, we have to take from somewhere else. But is there a way we could kind of even things out? Not even things out, but everyone gets something instead of zero at all?
And just clarify, when you say everyone, do you mean every school site or every category?
Every category,
Show?
yeah, the category that you're showing here. So like when I look at like security, I don't know what the stuff costs, but if we added like 3 million or 5 million to that, would that help? Would that do something? With some of these
Probably
other.
need more than that, but.
Well, no, I'll just use that as an
yeah,
example.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think certainly, again, I think from like a security perspective, I think it goes a long way to voters and to have a security component, because that, again, when we think about what's our priority to students and staff is safety. And so I think, again, I'll advocate, right, for security to be part of this.
I guess for me, I would love to see I see the cost ranges, and of course, we're not going to be able to get all the cost ranges for everything, but I would love to see if we can get something for some of these other categories, and what that looks like as well. The safety, I know for a lot of our kids, when we had the safety meeting, that was one of their big things as far as feeling safe at schools, and things we can do to feel safe at schools. And so I would just love to see if things can be done with some of these categories that we're not allocating anything for the 2024 bond. Eddie?
Yeah, I just maybe hopefully a quick question. I was just curious about the memo that we got in board books from the Office of Technology and Information Services about the device replacement. Is there a status on that?
Did the spreadsheet not make it in? Because I provided, I'm sorry if it did not make it in, I did provide a detailed
the memo
spreadsheet with that memo, so if that's not there, I certainly I have that ready and I can send that out at a moment's notice. The best way to get it is, Kara, is that getting that to you so we can put that back in the board books.
Is it the spin rate?
What's that?
Is it the spin rate?
Spin rate.
The spin rate.
I think you can make it in, Don. Your memo made it in, but I don't.
Yeah, I think the detailed spreadsheet of the cost for all of the different device replacement didn't make it in. I didn't see it in the packet, and I was wondering if it got incorporated into.
Yeah, it did.
So I will get that to Kara, and we'll get that into board books.
Apologies, Don.
Okay, yeah, I didn't see that. So is there a status update on that, or is it we're just waiting for all the details?
No, I have the spreadsheet that's got all the details. I don't know that I can walk you through it without it there to see it. It's broken down by the different groups, teachers groups, our administrative group, our non-licensed staff, our licensed staff that's not in the classroom, and our students in our one-to-one program.
Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah. I'll look at it later then.
Okay, sorry.
No worries.
Any other questions, Eddie?
No, I'm good.
All right. And then my last question, of course, is going to be with athletics. So I would love to see what that 148 broken down, what is that covering?
And I'll give the initial response. So we took the list that Julia provided last time. Heidi and Marshall and team got together to take a look at defining those scopes and providing a high-level cost estimate of those scopes. We're going to provide, kind of next step is a more specific crosswalk to see which site is included in the estimate, what's that scope of work, because I think there has been some movement there as well. So we just need a little more time to develop that, and we'll get that out. I don't know if there's anything.
All right. Don't have any more questions.
Can I just propose real
Yeah.
quick? I think one topic we haven't hit on is curriculum, and we have Trina Tobin and Marcus here if you have any questions or if you want to provide any high level kind of this is what we're looking at for curriculum.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think just really briefly, we're very appreciative of what the 2020 bond allowed for us to do to really come back into compliance with ODE's timelines for curriculum adoptions. So what we're proposing and the high level conceptual numbers that we've provided to Dan and team really allow for us to maintain that 7-year cycle in accordance with ODE's guidelines. So just really briefly stated, ODE puts out the standards and then the curriculum that they put forward for the Caribbeans and for all the professional learning around that, happens in that cycle. When we get off cycle, we miss out on those opportunities and we may not be in sync with the standards, right? Which is central in our instructional framework. And so what we've proposed is, and Marcus had to leave, but he's really looked at, he's our adoptions manager, and we really looked at now based off of where we're at with the recent curriculum adoptions, how do we come in sync with ODE's timelines and not have these big balloon payments where we're doing multiple adoptions in a short amount of time? And so our ask is really to essentially provide funds within the bond to maintain one curriculum area annually, which is in compliance. And then also what we're currently really digging into in partnership with Dawn's team is our digital apps. Right now we have a substantial amount of digital apps that support our curriculum use. Some of those are no longer necessary, and so we are removing those. We're getting a solid number for what we'll need moving forward. We're also looking at translations for our dual language programs and how that translation sits within the adoption cycle to get a really clear number where it's all conceptual right now. We've provided that to Dan's team and can certainly provide more information if you have any questions.
Thank you. And so just as I think, make sure I'm clear, so these are not necessarily new curriculum that we're getting. These are just mostly updates on a more systematic schedule to keep up with the whatever standards that might change.
Yes, and what we did brought us into compliance, and the curriculum cycles happen every 7 years. So we will be right back out of compliance if we do not maintain a regular schedule for our adoptions. So we've outlined what that would be, what area would be up to maintain that 7-year. You can be about 2 years, within that. And so what we've outlined does get us back in compliance and then on a good path moving forward.
So when you say adoption, so, and I'm new at this, so I'm learning. So when you talk about the adoption, and that's not new curriculum, is it? Or it could be?
It is, yeah. So I'll use something tangible. You approve the math adoption, right? So that math adoption will come yet again every 7 years, and we'll bring forward to you based off of our AIR committee, our adoption advisory committee with teachers and everyone reviewing multiple options. We'll bring forward to you that the board, the best option that we have selected for then your approval, and then the funds would come from here to support that. From the bond.
So it could be a whole new math adoption in 7 years.
Everything, right? So I mean, the cycle goes science, math, world language, English language arts, English language proficiency, health and PE, and social sciences. Rinse, repeat, right? Like it keeps going. It never stops. And that's what we haven't done in our system, right? We didn't align with the 7-year cycle, and hence that's why we needed this huge lift initially. So our ask is less than what we initially needed, but we do, in order to not dip into the Gen Fund, we do need this support.
Got it, okay. Lord.
New math every 7 years.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know how many different ways 1 + 1 = 2 can. All right.
It can be a renewal, right?
Okay.
We really enjoy
I like that. I like the renewal piece. Yeah, okay.
Then sometimes that's the case. Really, reality is in my 24 years, the standards have shifted, right? So that's also a part of it, and where our curriculum vendors keep, reshuffling some of those pieces within their materials.
Gotcha, thank you. All right, Eddie, you have any other questions?
No, I mean, I can talk to you about curriculum stuff if you want, but we can do that later.
Yeah, we can talk about that. All right. So I'm just want to say one last thing about this piece. Once again, I still think we need to go up to $5 billion. I'm gonna just put that out there, and I'm done with this. All right, let's move to the next one.
Chair Holmes?
Yes.
We do have someone sign up for public comment on this topic.
Oh.
Do you want to comment on this topic?
Sure.
Virginia LaForte.
Hey guys, so I'm Virginia LaForte. It's LA space Ephesus Frank ORTE, and I'm here today on behalf of the Grant Bowl Community Coalition and the Grant School community to comment on the 2024 bond and how it relates to Grant High School. We all read the documents that were linked in the agenda for today, and we specifically wanted to call out some questions about the long-range facilities plan. The bond plans for athletics clearly rely heavily on it, but now that we've had some recent changes, it's flawed. It doesn't include the Grant Bowl, which is now part of the PPS real estate portfolio. So we all know it'll be one of, if not the most heavily used asset in the PPS portfolio. So we're asking for PPS staff to take the steps necessary to amend the plan to include the bowl and to include it as a high priority, just to ensure that the Grant Bowl master plan is included and not overlooked in the 2024 bond. We haven't seen it pop up yet, so we were a little concerned. And we're also, as you hopefully will do that, ask that you simultaneously peel off the lights, as you've been hearing us, come back over and over and ask, peel it off so that we can address funding for the lights separately and more quickly, since they directly impact, the educational hours for our students, and they are a revenue generator. I know we're still waiting on the estimate that Director Brim Edwards requested. It's been almost 2 months, and we're still kind of waiting on that lights only estimate. So we were wondering what the status of that is. And also to let you know that the Grant Park Neighborhood Association did meet last week as a board and pass their own resolution supporting the urgent need for lights at the Grant Bowl, which was really exciting. It's a big change of pace from where we were 13 years ago. So I guess essentially, to borrow Director Green's words, that we can't keep kicking this can down the road. We're discussing multi-billion dollar bonds using a long-range facilities plan that doesn't include the athletic facility for our largest high school, one that has definitively never had lights, bathrooms, bleachers, nothing. So it's really important to Northeast Portland families. We've got thousands of students who live here, and we're celebrating our centennial year, and we're still sitting here in the dark. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. All right, any other public comments?
Sign up for the next topic.
Okay. All right, any other comments about this? Nope. All right, well, we'll go ahead and move to the next topic.
All right, we're going to do this one quickly. Dana White's going to walk us through kind of progress update and where we are with the PEC relocation.
So we have engaged, we have basically 4 consultants. We have Cobalt that is working on what we're now calling our operations center, commonly known as the warehouse, that is really the largest and most complex piece of this move. Bainbridge is working on the district office functions, which is just basically office space, and then Snell and Wilmer is our real estate attorneys, and McAdam Forbes is our broker. We are about 3/4 of the way through 45 interviews with different departments that are housed here. We really appreciate all the time and effort that all of the managers have put into this. There's a huge amount of work to do. We're getting information every day. Things are changing quickly. Usually having about a day or so to turn things around. So it's moving at a very quick pace. We do have our governance structure done. We are meeting 3 times a week as a core team and once a week directly with ABT on the real estate piece. And I know Liz is working on the operating agreement piece. So that was my fastest.
That was great. Any questions? Hearing none. Eddie, you got any questions?
Nope, not at this moment.
All right.
I should mention, Chair Hollins, that the board had requested to have a survey go out to all the staff that went out today.
Oh, awesome. All right. All right, well, any other information? Good for the committee? All right, we can be adjourned.
No, public comment.
Oh, public comment. All right.
We have Adam Mauer.
Chair Hollins, Board of Directors, my boss's 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 boss.
Okay.
Everybody. I'm an electrician from the maintenance team, and if you can remember, I spoke last month regarding the AVT concerns that we had for our maintenance department, making sure that we have a smooth transition, both in location and how we land space-wise. I'm going to paraphrase all this because I am glad to see Dana. Dana's been really good at communicating with me, and I've been able to communicate with our maintenance team through the DCU Labor Management Committee team. So we've been able to grab a lot of information from the boots on the ground in terms of what we need. And I'm really glad to see that we had a survey given today that was the start of finding a location. I found it to be a little bit on the undetailed side, but I just want to make the point that it's so important that we find a central location that gives equity to all the schools and makes us efficient, because lack of efficiency creates lack of production and more cost for the taxpayers to get the same work done. This has been an awesome site for 45 years, and though we need to leave, and I'm glad it's not going to be a 100-year-old building before we leave, because we've worked on those buildings, it has been fine-tuned to the best maintenance that we can provide. All the tools, all the processes, every single dock, every parking spot on the fleet deck, our warehouse people, all the space that we have and that we've filled up since it's been emptied in the late 90s. It's all filled up with new tasks, new processes. And our grounds team, hopefully rechanneling them back to our central maintenance team. I just wanted to be here and let you know that I'm very committed to helping the board, to helping the COO and our maintenance and facilities operations teams with doing whatever I can. And as a graduate of Jefferson High School class of 1988, I'm also here to thank everybody that was here to rebuild the alma mater that I so proudly came from and that built the person I am today. I also wanted to say that I want to make sure that our team stays as efficient as they are in the new land. And whatever I can do to provide that information, I want to be there available and to the taxpayers, to all the stakeholders, but most effectively to be the most effective maintenance team for the students.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
I don't, not yet. We're in this exploration phase right now, but one of the main things that has, at least as far as I know, with the board is to make sure that we not only get what we have, but possibly get better than what we have as well.
That would
with
be
this
amazing.
move. And so I think that's kind of the mindset that we're walking in this with, is that we want to, at the very least, have what we have now, but also to do better. There's no sense of going into a space where we just got the bare minimums versus going to a space where we're, have better than what we had. So it's like, I look at it like we're upgrading to a house. I don't need to go to another 1,200 square foot house. I'm leaving a 1,200 square foot house, so.
And a lot of our building ages are growing from 100 years, to the most recent technology. And I don't have to tell you, the technology is just expanding so fast. So that to the 100-year-old buildings is just such a huge area that we are going to need to expand, and our processes and our tools and our diagnostics and maybe even our crew someday will maybe expand. So I want to thank you for your ear.
Yes.
Thank you for your time and communication.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Any other public? That's it? All right. Anybody else want to talk about anything else? No? Meeting is adjourned.
Yeah, thank you all.